Hello, Hayley. It's such an honor to have you as a guest on the Paleo Gardening Expert Interview segment. Thanks for coming on the show.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hayley Ryczek is a cookbook author, blogger, and avid homesteader. She resides on a 6-acre homestead with gardens and chickens. She has written 3 cookbooks. So, Hayley, how would you explain all that you do to anyone who's unfamiliar with your work?
I would consider what we do organized chaos, and it's a heck of a lot of fun. The one thing I like to stress is that homesteading isn't something that's formal or official. It's as easy as planting things, eating things, and having some animals. However you choose, however elaborate that is or basic it is, it doesn't really matter as long as you're doing something.
Yeah, that's a really good way to look at that, because some people do try to make it, like, too complex.
You don't have to have, like, acres of land and goats and cows and potbelly pigs. For us, it's just about we have some chickens for eggs, and we have a garden and some fruit trees, and we dabble in a little bit of meat, growing our own meat birds, a little bit of turkeys. It changes, so often as to what we choose to do, but it's really a lot less complicated than most people think it is. And for us, we had paralysis by analysis for a long time where we hesitated to take the steps because we thought it was more complicated than it was. It's just chickens. They just lay eggs. It's really that simple.
That's nice. So everyone has a unique story of how they regain their health in the paleo world. So could you tell me about your journey to starting the paleo diet?
See, my situation's really unique, where a lot of people have a time that they made a conscious decision to be quote-unquote paleo. Paleo for me has just always been a part of my life in some capacity. And logically, I just fell into that community based on what I was already doing. I grew up in a family where my grandmother, had a big garden, and I was always familiar with cooking things from scratch. My grandma was a foodie before foodies were foodies. We ate steak, we ate homegrown lima beans. We, if it didn't come from the garden or she didn't can it, then it wasn't something that we had. And my mom, kept up a lot of those same things too, and that's a lot of how I live my life today, not because it's a quote-unquote diet or a way of life or some new, new age era way of living. It's just something that logically made sense. We forage for our own food, we grow our own food, we eat things in their most natural form because it just makes sense to us and not because it's something that we were told is better or worse. And it's something that makes our bodies feel better. And we've noticed these dramatic changes as we got closer and closer to that, I want to say, the paleo perfectionism. As you get a little closer to a lot of that idealist mentality, we experienced, a lot of health changes. We do incorporate raw dairy into our paleo template. And for my husband especially, he had a severe seafood allergy where if he even touched shrimp, he itched. We carried EpiPens with us in case we got cross-contamination when we ate out. And then all of a sudden, he started to feel different when he incorporated raw dairy and fermented foods into his diet on a regular basis. And within about 2 years of having that on a consistent basis, his seafood allergy is 100% healed. And that's something that we didn't even realize was so monumental until we look at kids today with peanut allergies and food allergies, that how such a small change in our already pretty clean paleo template made such a dramatic difference.
Yeah, that's interesting. My son also had food allergies. We carried an EpiPen. His were tropical fruits and things of that nature. He couldn't really eat avocados and bananas. And about 2 years into a cleaner paleo diet, he now eats bananas and avocados with no problems at all. So it's like,
that's awesome.
It's cool because they tell us you can never outgrow that stuff, but it's not true. You can.
When I went to the doctor and was like, we don't need an EpiPen anymore, and they're like, well, what do you mean? And my husband took a baggie with shrimp and was like, 'cause I can eat it now. They're like, oh my gosh, you're gonna die. He's like, nope, I'm cured. Of course, then they say, well, maybe you never had an allergy to begin with, but that's how it works.
No. So how has your journey to this cleaner paleo diet affected the way that you're helping others now?
Well, this is kind of something that's really important and really special to me. I think that when I say we, I mean we collectively as a society have a horrible tendency to try and judge people by what we see, the external value of what they've been doing to determine their health or their consciousness about health. I'm not someone who is thin. I am not someone who you would look at and say, wow, she's really, a model of health. However, I don't know someone who eats cleaner than I am or has better health markers than I do. I'm one of those people whose body is really responsive to what I eat. So the main thing that I have learned in my journey is the standard thing of don't judge a book by its cover is probably the most important thing to not do, is don't judge someone by what you see on the outside. Because someone may seem to have things together and because someone's working out at the gym or even CrossFit or anything like that, and they may have a physique you want, don't confuse that with health, because that's a very small part of the bigger picture. I learned not to judge people and to be more compassionate and more understanding. I've also learned to really be excited for people in the small steps that they take, because we don't know what really they've come from. People that come from an area where they didn't have access to good vegetables, or families that didn't eat a lot of vegetables. When they start incorporating those into their diet, they may not lose a lot of weight, but they've done amazing things for their health. So it's that differentiating the external from the internal health that has really given me a different way to view the world, and it's made me more empathetic to helping other people who are in similar challenges as I am.
Yeah, that sounds like really great advice, because, everybody's different, even from the inside to the outside. So recently on your blog, you've been sharing about your water fast. Could you explain what your water fast looks like?
Water, 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 more water, lots of water. Free time, trying to figure out what do you do when you're not eating or cooking or doing dishes is probably the strangest part about water fasting. They're like, now what? Now what am I going to do? I have nothing else to do. I mean, my world revolves around cooking, eating, cleaning up after food, researching food, read about food, watching food on TV. That's my life. And it's really a shock to your system. I'm someone who has completed many different types of fasts. It's something that I'm very interested in the way that we can control our body and help facilitate healing, help facilitate routine maintenance in a real way that's natural and that we've done for thousands of years as a regular part of human existence. It makes you very aware of how overwhelming food is for a standard person. I work at home. I'm a homesteader. I'm a blogger. I rarely leave the house more than a handful of times a week. After I had been fasting for a few days and at home, and I actually left the house and went to town, I realized how challenging it definitely is for people who are already eating at a lot of restaurants and have a lot of external factors to deciding what they eat. There's food around every corner, and it's in every store, whether it's a drugstore, whether it's a grocery store, whether it's a big box retailer, whether it's a department store. There's food everywhere. And it does take someone to be of a very strong mental capacity to say, yeah, I don't need any of that. Not just I need some later or I need a healthier option, but to say I need none. it's tough. It's definitely something that's hard to deal with. You know, not grabbing a coffee, not grabbing an iced tea. You know, well, I have water with me, and that's all I'm going to have. I think that it's something that everyone should incorporate because it reminds you how much we eat that we shouldn't, how much of a role food plays in our lives that it shouldn't play, period.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never thought about it. Not cooking. What do you do? So how many days do you do the water fast for?
I water fasted for 12 full days this time. And my husband and I just started another water fast yesterday. We're really not, like, talking about it the same way, like, on the blog or on social media we did the first time. It's just we felt so good when we were fasting. And we stopped because it was my husband's birthday. If it wasn't for his birthday, we would have went longer. But we just looked at each other like, let's do it again. I mean, it's just something that it really felt easy for us because I've done bone broth fast. We've both done juice fast. We know it's mind over matter. We know our body doesn't need to take anything else in. I do have a goal set that this calendar year I want to do the 40-day water fast. It's like my 2016 bucket list, like the number one thing. I want to fast for 40 days in this year of water only. The goals I set for myself are pretty hilarious, I know.
Hope you got good water.
We do. We have 2 water filtration systems.
Yeah, we did that too. We just filtered the entire house, so it's the showers, everything is all good, clean water.
Yep.
So on my family farm, we're in the beginning stages of this year's garden. So what are your plans for your homestead this upcoming year?
Last year we had a rough start. A mink got into our chicken coop and wiped out 11 of my 15 chickens. And then we had to hurry up and get chicks, and it was very overwhelming, and it's not something that as a homesteader you're ever really prepared for, no matter how long you've homesteaded, no matter what your level of attachment or detachment is from the animals you raise. It's just not something that it's ever really easy to deal with. So we had to scramble and get chicks last minute, and then we had our meat birds come because we typically raise 50 meat birds a year. And then we make a decision last minute, are we going to raise turkeys or not raise turkeys? So last year we had to take care of these little baby chicks to replace our egg layers, our 50 meat birds, the garden, and then, you know, dealing with that guilt of losing our birds to a mistake we made because our door didn't shut and a mink got in. We've decided that this year we're just going to take a little animal break. So we have our roughly 38 chickens now, or 30 chickens, I'm sorry. We have 30 chickens now, and we're just going to go with just our 28 egg layers and 2 roosters and not bring in any babies, not raise any turkeys. We have wonderful farms we can buy chicken from, so I don't feel that I have to raise meat birds. When we started into raising chickens, it was because we didn't have access to locally raised organic pasture chicken. But now we do, so we don't have that hanging over our heads. So this year we're going to scale back on the animals a little bit, take a little bit of a breather. We want to focus a little more on foraging and coming up with a more streamlined version of our garden, making sure that what we're planting is what we actually use, and then we're maximizing our space so that we're getting the most return out of our space investment in our garden.
Sounds like a good plan. I know what you mean about losing your birds. We had a flock of 50 turkeys, and a bear came and opened the window and went into the hen house and killed 35 turkeys one night.
Oh my gosh! I have to say that if there is one animal that, as a homesteader, I want to. Okay, I do have a lifelong dream, and that is to raise turkeys, and I want to own a turkey farm, and I want to have baby turkeys all the time, and I want to have mama turkeys raising baby turkeys because I think that turkeys are the most fabulous creatures ever. And I've always fallen in love with them, and my heart just breaks for you. While I love my chickens, my true calling is being a turkey farmer, because I just think they're wonderfully fascinating creatures.
Oh, they're amazing. We love having the turkeys around. So let's talk about your cookbook. Let's talk about what is your process for developing new recipes.
Well, whether it's really a cookbook or for the blog, everything that I create really stems out of real life. You know, I like to do a lot of different things in our house, but basically we eat not complicated dishes. You know, I try to do like for my cookbooks, I try to keep them what I call up the middle, or for everyone, meaning that it's things that are easily adaptable. It's not complicated. It's not a bunch of crazy directions or, you know, special ingredients. It's the same things that we've all grown up eating. It's the same things that, you know, you would buy in a TV dinner, things that are very, very easy for everyone to understand. You know, for most of my blog posts, anything on those recipes, those are things that we really ate. Like, typically I'm taking pictures of dinner and then posting it the next day on the blog or in the next couple of days. It's really authentic from my kitchen, what we really eat, basic stuff. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like to do like Brazilian fish stew every now and then, but most of the time we're having steak and pork chops and the basics. I try to do things as easy as possible. Cooking doesn't have to be complicated. Paleo cooking doesn't have to be complicated. You know, making a couple small changes can really make a world of difference in the way that you cook and the way that you feed your family.
I noticed that we were gluten-free, dairy-free at first, and then we stepped up to paleo, and cooking actually got easier than the gluten-free, dairy-free, because there's not all the baking and all the extra goo, and yeah, it's just like way simpler. We just after we stopped fasting, we're eating more of a like low carb, ketogenic, high fat type situation. Just taking out a lot of the extra crap. You know, like I'm not baking breads or making desserts and doing all this other stuff. We're just eating like meats and fats and vegetables and salad, and it works beautifully. It is. There's not as much stress. For me personally, just eating gluten or grain-free only is complicated, because then that's when I'm like making fried calamari, and I'm going to make this version of General Tso's, and I made these cupcakes, and it really doesn't get you much further than you were before. Yep. That's the exact thing that happened here, because I just cleaned up all that stuff, and I don't bake anymore, and very rarely. And, boy, it got easy. It was nice. So what were some exciting discoveries you made while writing your cookbook?
I realized the number one thing I realized is that I work really well under pressure, and I never thought that I was one of those people, but my husband identified that for me, that when times are chaotic and multitasking and trying to juggle a bunch of different things, because, I mean, both of my cookbooks I wrote in like 3 months. 100 recipes, 3 months is a lot of work. But he never felt like I was overwhelmed. He never felt like it invaded into our time. I was really diligent about keeping things a Monday through Friday, generally done by 6. And that's kind of where I'm in my happy place. You know, for me, that chaotic situation and that type of repetitive fine-tuning recipes is really something I'm good at, more so than writing. I really like the cooking part of it. And I do have more of a love for photography than I ever thought I would. But, I mean, I really enjoyed both of my cookbooks. My first one was, you know, I say the first one was, you know, pretty easy. You know, I've written some ebooks in there too, but, you know, my printed cookbooks, you know, by the second one, I was just like, this is no big deal. We'll just get this many done and punch them out and move on. I was in a groove. It was a lot of fun, actually.
That's cool. Is there a third one in the works?
No. I have 2 ebooks and 2 printed cookbooks, and I'm ready to just have a blog again and work on me a little more and work on the garden. And right whenever I started with the first cookbook, I kind of had like this lofty dream where I really wanted to research and read more about foraging and get a little bit, deeper into foraging. We're avid mushroom foragers and some wild edibles, but I really wanted to learn more than everything was told because you can't read and research the way I do while writing cookbooks. So I'm just really take a breather for a minute. My second one's coming out this July, so things are going to ramp up a little bit before that comes out.
Yeah, that's cool. So on paleo gardening, we're passionate about teaching skills that increase the affordability of the high-quality foods. So do you have any suggestions for making a whole foods diet more affordable?
I think this goes back to what we were talking about the smaller your scope is, the simpler it is. It's also the less expensive it is. When you're trying to do too much, when you get into this more of a whole foods diet, it's very easy to fall into those almond flour traps and fancy dishes. The easiest thing is to work on a good whole chicken once a week and making, roasting it, using that for a couple of different meals, and using the bones for broth. That's one of the biggest money savers you can have. Using lesser expensive cuts of grass-fed beef. Our local butcher friend said, hey, try these chuck steaks we have. They're excellent and they're really inexpensive. Well, they're our favorite steak. They're kind of like a ribeye. They're kind of fatty. They're kind of lovely. And I think they're like $6 a pound. So
yeah, that's my favorite cut.
I rarely cook with any expensive cuts of meat. We really just maximize, the easy stuff and try to stretch it as far as we can. And being mindful of what an actual portion size is huge. And that's something that we really work on here at home. There's just 2 of us in the house, 2 adults. There's no reason for me to cook a pound of meat and that to get eaten in a full meal because that's really too much protein for us to have in one meal. The overconsumption of protein isn't that good either. It's about everything in balance. Being mindful of portions, planning things out. If you just get on a system where you're going to buy, so many pounds of meat, so many pounds of pork, and so many pounds of chicken for every week, and then buy the cheapest you can and maximize that, you throw in some vegetables and a salad, that's all you need. You don't need all the extra fluff. You don't need to get into all kind of complicated supplements and extra add-ons and truffle oil this and, special garlic-infused ghee that. I mean, just start with the basics, and you will be healthier sticking with the basics than you are when you try to get too complicated. And it's so much less expensive.
I agree. You just described basically how we eat as well. And it is simpler and it is a lot easier. Plus, you can grow some of that right in your own yard, huh?
Exactly. We still have, I know we do eat. For us, paleo is anything that we can grow. I mean, somebody wants to argue with me that lima beans and potatoes aren't paleo. Go right ahead, but they came from my dirt. So for me, that's paleo. We don't eat a lot of them, but we still have potatoes, from the garden. I have potatoes canned from years ago. It's about just maximizing what you have and stretching it. Like for potatoes, we canned potatoes because they weren't storing for us one year. And I can them in pints, which means they're small servings, which means we keep ourselves in check and we stretch out our harvest as long as we can. And that makes a big impact to know that I don't have to buy potatoes for like 10 years. But literally, that's how many potatoes I've canned. But, it's those little things that people don't realize. The only reason I have canned potatoes is because we had a great crop, and that's what you have to do.
So what are some simple tips you would give someone who's just beginning to preserve food?
Dehydrator. Buy a $60 dehydrator and just start drying stuff. It's really amazing how easily you can dehydrate a lot of food and put it up for the winter. I think that it's something that is really overlooked. Even if you're buying stuff at farmers markets and grocery stores, you can dehydrate so many things that you wouldn't think of. I mean, you can blanch cauliflower and dry it, chop it up like cauliflower rice, and then you have dehydrated cauliflower rice that you just add hot water to, it reconstitutes and cooks. You don't need to have any special equipment outside of a dehydrator. You can make jerky with it. You can dry fruit. You can dry mushrooms. You know, you can dry your own spices. That's something that's hugely overlooked. You could pick up a giant bunch of parsley, dry it, and you have enough for a few years, and save money on it. You know where it came from, or have it growing in a container on your back porch. You know that it's organically grown and in your windowsill. Just dry your extra. You can dry tomatoes. You can dry so many things. Whereas canning, I mean, I think canning is really fabulous, and that's a whole other discussion, but it's a little overwhelming for a lot of people, and it's not something they want to jump into right away. So I normally think that drying things, dehydrating, is really the best first step. And we dehydrate potatoes. In addition to canned potatoes, I also have dried potatoes everywhere. So, you know, it's a simple Google search, how to dehydrate carrots, and you can do it. And it's shelf stable for years and years and years, and it doesn't matter if they freeze. It doesn't matter if they're warm. You just make sure they're dry.
Yeah, we have a big dehydrator. I dehydrated a bunch of lettuce one time. It was great. It's after it was dry, I crumbled it, put it in a jar, and then I add a couple teaspoons to, you know, soups and stews and stuff. And yeah, it's
awesome.
Pretty amazing. Are there any exciting projects you are working on for the future?
I'm actually working on nothing big. Like I said, this year I'm taking things a little slower, but I am doing a really fun project where I want to try to help people understand that no matter what your situation is, you can grow your own food. So I'm teaming up with a few companies that offer some resources. Like the one is a little aquarium with fish in it, and you can aquaponic grow, you know, some herbs and greens in your kitchen. I'm going to teach people step by step how to do some sprouting, which anyone can do, even if you're in a one-bedroom studio apartment in New York City without a window. You know, growing herbs on a windowsill. You know, taking it back to the very basics. People think because that it's big, but we don't have a large garden. We have 10 raised planting beds, and we grow more than enough food for ourselves. So out of our 6 acres, a very, very small fraction of a percent is actually dedicated to growing our own food. And I think it's you know, people need to realize that all winter I have herbs growing on my windowsill, and a lot of them I dig up from my garden and bring them into the house. So, and I don't even have a great window for growing, but I really want to empower people that no matter what your situation is, you can grow something, whether it's just parsley on your windowsill, whether it's just chives in a pot on your front door. Everyone can grow something. So I'm really excited about doing a whole series of posts on that on my blog.
So your work has helped so many, and there are many of us who would like to see you continue. So how can anyone listening stay involved with your work?
You can always catch up with what I'm doing on my blog at healthstartsinthekitchen.com. I'm on social media, Facebook. I do lots of sharing on Instagram, probably too much. I'm Health Starts in the Kitchen on all social media networks. And I love to interact, and there's no question that's, you know, too big or too small. I'm always eager to help. I have a friend in Florida that she, you know, don't really know her other than, you know, from blogging and social media, that I'm trying to help her, you know, figure out how to grow some things in the hot Florida sun in the middle of summer. You know, she sends me pictures of cucumbers. Is this powdery mildew? I'm always here to help, you know, troubleshoot, try to help you figure out, you know, the community aspect of what we all do is so underrated. And I know so many people feel that they shouldn't reach out, but the biggest compliment you can give someone is to reach out with a question and tell them, hey, I really admire your garden. Could I get some pictures of it? I love your planting beds. Or what do you do to fight tomato hornworms? Step on them, you know. That kind of thing is, you know, they're always welcome, and never hesitate to reach out.
That's great. I know people need somebody to look up to and somebody who's a step ahead of them in the garden, and that's really, really important. So I want to thank you for taking the time to join me on the show today.
Well, thank you for having me. I had a blast. I love being on.
Mm-hmm. For those of you listening, learn more about Hayley by clicking in the links in the description or by visiting healthstartsinthekitchen.com. It was a pleasure to have you as a guest on the Paleo Gardening Expert interview. I'd like you to have a wonderful day.
Thank you.